It's Thursday, November 7th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is truly a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Nate Tice. Nate, what's going on, buddy?
Not too much. I'm enjoying that I get to wear my sweatshirt now. I like to wear sweatshirts for my podcast anyways, but now it's actually cool enough where I'm not sweating on every show and looking beet red like I have high blood pressure. So I'm doing great. Doing fantastic. But no, I'm excited for this show too. Do a little mid-season check-in stuff, not to spoil your intro, but that always gets me fired up. Get to put a little bow on some thoughts that are happening so far this season. Very fired up to be here.
Exactly. Yeah. Producer Colin, I guess, is a timeline. He's kind of a timeline hardo here because he said we could not do mid-season stuff leading into week 9. Had to be leading into week 10 because this is now truly like we are past the midpoint of the season. We've gotten 9 games in. We've got 9 weeks in, at least for every single team, and we've got 9 to go. Makes sense. The fantasy season ends in week 17. For a lot of people, the fantasy season ends before that because they're not making the playoffs. But whatever. We're not here to talk about the specific timelines of what is and is not the midseason of your individual fantasy team. That's up to you. But all of you obviously are going to win your championships if you're listening to this show. That is part of the money back guarantee of the program. But as Nate said, we are doing midseason review content. We're going to do a little bit different than we usually do here in the fantasy film room. We're still going to have a nerding out section, but instead of taking like one big picture topic and really fleshing that out, we're just going to go some little low-hanging fruit here in the first part of the show. We're just going to do a midseason review. Nate and I each have one big surprise and one big disappointment from the season so far. In the nerding out section, I'm going to do a little nerding out as well as Nate does his typical nerding out. And we're going to talk about one trend at the midseason that really matters. And of course, not only are we going to talk about what has happened, we're going to talk about what we think could happen with each of these individual topics. And then, of course, we wrap, as we always do, with a Thursday night preview. So, Nate, let's get into the midseason review and talk biggest surprises. You go first. You give me your biggest surprise to start.
Yeah, we didn't getting the superlatives kind of set up and everything. I feel like some of them are going to be, if anyone's listening to this show or Football 301 is going to go, like, of course he's talking about that. But this is a player in an offense that's kind of been just, on the no-fly zone. I shouldn't say the player has, but the team and the offense has been in the no-fly zone for me for a while, for a long time. 2 head coaches. And that's the Panthers and Chuba Hubbard, their running back. Being an actual, not only viable fantasy running back, a potential, league difference maker running back, it's also a guy in real football that just is having a solid to good season. I would even say good season. And, the Panthers this offseason really invested in their offensive guards. They really said, hey, we're going to get physical in the interior. We're going to be, Dave Canales came out and made jokes about, I'm going to establish that run. We're seeing some dividends being paid for that investment in the run game and investment in the size and the interior. Chuba Hubbard coming from Oklahoma State, to me, was a very, we say runway guy for route runners. That's kind of how he was as a runner to me. He needed a guy that needed a little clear path and just let him get going, and just kind of a quote unquote simple runner is kind of how I described him. And you kind of see that happening in the pros, but when you got some beef going on with the Panthers and the commitment to the run game, you see him get going. He's a very efficient guy. He's second right now in rushing yards over expected, only behind, I believe, it's our guy, Derrick Henry, which doesn't surprise anyone. He's 8th in rushing success rate. He's got very high normal rushing yards as well. I believe he's in the top 5 or top 6. But you look at his stats, and this also applies to when you're watching him in the eye test, he has the lowest missed tackle rate. He forces the lowest amount of missed tackles, according to Next Gen Stats. That kind of tracks about his play style. You give him a clear path, he's going to be an efficient, smooth runner, a zone guy, but pretty good on the man gap stuff as well. So I just am pleasantly surprised that he's been able to take this workload and really just be more efficient than when I pictured him coming out of college, which I kind of thought he'd be more boom busty with his simple running style. Okay, you give him a path, boom, he can go and he can hit it. But now almost like him and Khalil Herbert, I had them kind of pictured the same. When we talked a little bit about Khalil Herbert in the trade yesterday on Football 301, but really that's how I picture Chuba. But I'm like, man, I maybe sold you a little bit short. I don't think he's a total star or anything, but more of a good guy, a good back that can take these touches and be very efficient with them. Also just want to say, give him a shout out. kind of a character of this season because the Steelers offense has been kind of a character for this season. But that's the running back, Najee Harris, a guy that I sold. Like I was done with him. I'm like, all right, he deserved to be in the league. Not saying, oh, total bust, but just like, all right, I know what you are. You're more of a high end, really good too. You should be in a rotation with somebody else. He took a challenge. He got called out by a Colts defender, and I think he just went, "Oh, okay, this is how I'm getting pictured. All right, I got to amp this up." And you feel the difference when you watch the Steelers run game and you watch Najee Harris. You see him falling forward. You see him fighting through those last tackles, not stopping his feet. That was the big eye test thing with Najee, was that he was kind of slowing his feet down on contact. When you're 230, that's not really the formula that I want to see. That's not going to really be what you should be. So I wanted to give him a shout out as well, that these, how I think I grouped this together was 2021 running back class surprises. But yeah, seeing Chuba Hubbard and Najee Harris both thriving and stepping up and doing what they should be doing, but really showing that they belong to get these touches in the NFL. Bit of a very pleasant surprise for me.
I like this. Let's put a pin in Harris and stick on Hubbard here for a second.
Yeah.
Because Chuba Hubbard wasn't even drafted in like the top 40 running backs this year. I do think most people expected Jonathan Brooks to play a lot sooner than because he hasn't played yet. So people definitely expected him like after the first
the overhit.
Yeah, I would say the overhit. People probably expected him to play in like after 4 weeks, when he started the year on PUP or whatever, and it just has dragged on and on. So that's a big reason why I think people thought, all right, Hubbard's maybe going to hold the fort to start the year, but eventually Brooks is going to come in. Clearly, whatever optimistic timelines, the Panthers tried to sell you, like, oh, he's going to be ready for training camp. He's not going to be ready for training camp, but he's going to be ready early in the season. Clearly, a lot more happened than what and that's another thing. We can definitely chalk up Jonathan Brooks as just another one of these like injury optimism. They're lying to you, okay, in the offseason for sure. They do not have to tell you the truth. They're not, in my personal opinion, they're not even telling you the truth on the injury report in each individual week. They're definitely not telling you the truth, and they don't have to put an injury report out in the summer.
Questionable can mean so many things now.
Yeah.
It can mean anything now.
One of my like many axes to grind with fantasy coverage sometimes is just like it's the diehard nature of the injury report. Like, all right, well, he's practicing full. He's 100% healthy. That is not what that means. So yeah, again, that's a whole nother thing. Obviously, why he was drafted as low as he was. But Hubbard right now is running back 7 overall. He's averaging 13.8 points per game in Yahoo standard scoring. That's right in line with like Breece Hall, 13.6. So again, we're talking about a guy who was drafted inside the top 5 of basically every fantasy draft, and a guy who wasn't even taken inside the top 40 at the position. I was going to ask you, why is Hubbard good? Because I'll be honest with you, I've never been that big of a fan of the player. I thought he was kind of, and I know you kind of just alluded to that too. I would describe him not as like a bad running back in his first few seasons, just like an utterly forgettable running back. At the same time, he did, and this is damning with faint praise, but he significantly outplayed Miles Sanders last year in the Frank Reich offense. But still, regardless of that, this is a guy that you mentioned the success rate, which is at least Pro Football Reference has a 57.9%. That's over 10% higher than where he was at last year at 47.5%, and that was his career best mark. And I love the way you describe, like you noted the low missed tackle rate, because I don't think he's a guy like, so again, Nate, explain it to me like I'm 5. Why is Chuba Hubbard good this year versus, is it just all the offensive line and the system, or like what is the deal here?
An offensive line boost and a coach that actually wants to be there. Though those are two boosts. Yeah. Miles Sanders, I can see why he won over Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders does have more talent. I don't think that's crazy to say, but can be off schedule. He can bounce too many things. He can kind of just not hit the hole that he should. And I think that's why Hubbard got kind of the faith of the coaches was, okay, you're at least going to get us, if it's blocked for 4, you'll get us 4. And that's really what a lot of this, if you're not going to be an actual star and you're more of one of the 80% of the players that's in the middle in the NFL, if coaches can rely on you, they're going to play you, especially if you just don't have another guy. And Miles Sanders too was kind of a coach love, Deuce Staley being the running back coach and all that. So maybe it was kind of like, all right, Deuce is gone. All right, cool. Get this guy in there. Like there's, the politics of that. I really
Which
think
is funny, Nate, because if you remember when they drafted Chuba Hubbard, because you mentioned like the last two staffs. I mean, shoot, the last three staffs ain't been so good in Carolina. Remember the phone call with Matt Rule and Chuba Hubbard was basically like the draft day phone call when they picked Hubbard. He was like, "Oh yeah, you tore us up in college." My wife was even like, "You're not going to pick this guy that tore you up in college," because Matt Rule's Baylor team had played by Chuba Hubbard and he did rip them all up. And I was like, and again, this is just bias, but immediately I was like, well, I'm not taking this guy seriously.
Right.
Like, because that's like some Urban Meyer level stuff or something like that, but yeah, and again, maybe that's just my own personal bias, but he was like a favorite of a coach, like two coaching staffs ago, but he stuck around this long.
And I think that's what it is. It's just they rely on him. There's not a lot of stars on this team. I mean, I'm not shaking it for anybody. So it's kind of like the best of a bad bunch. And that's, like I said, I just compared him to Khalil Herbert. Like that's kind of the tier in my brain that he is just, I keep coming back to the term simple. And because it's just, he plants his foot and goes. So if you're running zone, he's going to plant his foot, get north, and he's going to get the yards that are there. He does a lot of things like above average, but not anything really good. So it just checks all about, he's not bad at this. He's not bad at this either. And when you get Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, a true style that's trying to make it safer for the quarterback, and maybe so like, okay, we really have to invest in the run game because that's going to kind of get us going first and second down. I think that's just what it is. It's just a simple attack that works for them. I would trust him to hit the hole more than like Rachaad White, sure. Like that. And even if Rachaad White has more talent, Hubbard's weird too, because originally in college, he was like a long play guy. And then now it's like he's a simple 5-yard zone runner. So I think that's just kind of what it is. It's a circumstances. It's a team that needs someone that is simple and can be efficient. And he's kind of just rewarding them. And I think some of even the missed tackle stuff applies to that. Some of that's his play strength, but also some of that is because he's not trying to make anyone miss. He's like, oh, you're contacting me. I'm going to fall forward for another yard, as opposed to like, oh, I'm going to make you miss in the phone booth. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Do I like that? Do I love it? I don't know. Do I do not like it? Either. It's somewhere in the middle, somewhere for me. But that's just kind of how the player he is. And like I said, I think it's just the circumstances of it all. But yeah, I don't know. Pleasant surprise. I thought he was a perfect category for this. And now I'm looking at more and more stats, and now I'm actually watching the Panthers a little bit. Just more of a morbid curiosity than anything.
Sure.
It's just watching our guy Cokehead. And so like watching those guys out there, watching Hubbard, I'm like, all right, you're getting the job done. That's what he is. He's getting the job done. And obviously it's paying dividends for anyone that's got him in fantasy right now.
Yeah, I've spent actually too much time watching the Panthers because I'm in the middle of charting rookies right now, and they've got 2 rookie receivers that are seen a lot of playing time. So I've seen more of the Panthers offense than most humans should this calendar year. So
we all have those teams that we do. I'm watching a lot of Patriots right now, man.
We all
watch a lot of Broncos offense. I've been watching some bad. Well, Broncos offense at least has some stuff going for them, but.
So let's spin this forward with Hubbard before we move on to my big surprise here. What should we expect rest of season here? And I know a lot of it is just up to the unknown of what does Brooks give them, if anything. I will say, just like even when Brooks gets back there, and I do still think it's an if, they've been kind of coy about whether they even expect him to play this season, which it's a little tough. Nice you have one of the most successful running backs in the NFL right now on like a per rush basis, and you spent a 2nd round pick on a guy that might not even play for you, and you're not, and it's not a premium position. I'm not an anti-running back guy, but it's not a premium position. Again, you can find a Chuba Hubbard, and it's tough. It's tough when you're in the place where the Panthers are right now. That being said, though, Canales is even. I've heard interviews with him. I've seen him talk about Chuba Hubbard and describe him as one of the guys we want to lift up, because of how hard he works and yada yada. And you mentioned the commitment to the run game. So I don't know, man. Like, what is the rest of the season going to play out in this Carolina backfield? Do you think here?
They're not shying away from it. I think it's Hubbard's thing. Like Hubbard's, that's who's going to get the primary touches. Because even if Brooks does come back, say he does make a miracle thing, comes back in the last 6 weeks or whatever, they're still probably going to ease him in, and they probably don't trust him to do some of the little thing stuff. Another thing with Brooks is he's not the biggest guy either. So even like I always pictured him as part of maybe a 1A with another 1B, part of the rotation. So like I still think this is Hubbard's show. Going against the defenses he's going against upcoming, like, he has the Giants, You can get them. They are tough. They're better against the pass as far as their pass rush. You can get them against the run, but it's a tougher defense. But then the Chiefs, after their bye week, Chiefs are tough against the run this year too. So this is more of the defenses they go against than maybe his role at all. And also if they're down in those games, are they throwing it more? Are they kind of like, not be able to stay in some neutral game script? Hasn't hurt them so far as they got their, they get whitewashed week in, week out, but it's kind of, so I think it's just still, this is his backfield. At worst, it turns into a 70-30 kind of thing, or 75-25 kind of thing. Cause I think they won't want to rush Brooks right back in, cause that is a major injury. So, you got to have some rust beaten off of him or worked off of him as he kind of comes back in. So I think Hubbard just maintained the course. Is he going to be a top, was he 7th right now? I still think he's crazy. I still think he stays with good numbers. Is he top 8 still the rest of the year? I'm not sure, but he's still going to hover in that area because the usage is there. Their type of style is still there, and he's kind of earned those touches. Like you just mentioned him working hard. That's why the coaches like him. They're probably going hey, I don't need this other guy that's not going to be here. Why do you think they got rid of, Deontay Johnson? They got to keep the streak going with him. But they're getting guys that if they're building a culture, they're going to reward the guys that are showing that they invest in the culture. And I'm guessing that he's one of them.
Yeah, he has 133 carries. Miles Sanders second on the team with 36. So there is some room here for him to give a little bit and still be a very productive fantasy back. I mean, look, we're talking about the Lions offense versus the damn Panthers offense, but I could see this turning into a Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery type of thing, where especially because Hubbard's a free agent at the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if they re-sign him. And, just again, because we're trying to build a culture here and people are like, what are you doing? You just drafted Jonathan Brooks. Like me, I'm literally saying Matt Harmon drafted Jonathan Brooks in the first round of his dynasty rookie draft. Like, I want this guy to get all the touches. Maybe that's not the type of back he is. And Hubbard could end up being like the David Montgomery of that situation. Real quick, just on Najee Harris. They're coming out of their bye week. I agree. We actually talked about Najee somewhat recently on saying the quiet part out loud, and he's just really transformed a season here. What are your expectations, just kind of real quick, about the Steelers' run game and their offense sort of coming out of the bye here?
Nothing really. Actually, I'm curious what Arthur Smith does out of the bye. I really do like his stuff. We've talked about that plenty. Getting Mike Williams and everything. We talked about that on the trade deadline show yesterday on Football 301. It's more of the same. So the Arthur Smith is not going to change his formula, which is just they're going to be pounding the rock over and over. They're going to be using a bunch of tight ends. Even Mike Williams being a big boy receiver, that doesn't mean like, oh, we're going to just also pass 100 times more. They're just trying to weaponize the passes they do now, make those more viable. So it's not just, hey, George, get open. At least we have another viable target or a person to target on that. I think this is the formula for them. And he's always going to be, he being Arthur Smith, is always going to spell the back a little bit. Even when you have Bijan, even with all that, even Derrick Henry's kind of his own thing, but he still will spell the back where the other guy, this case, Jaylen Warren, will get more touches. Have we been able to rely on Jaylen Warren to be there week in, week out? Not really. As much as I think Warren is super talented and super useful, but the thing is, if you're not out there, availability is everything now. Was it availability is reliability? There's
is the best ability.
That is the best ability. Thank you. I think that it's not, his usage isn't going away. I actually think they're going to lean even more into it as they kind of get cooking with the line. They're figuring out that they got the bye week now. So don't think there's any changes. I actually think it's still on the upswing. I haven't looked at their schedule after the bye, but it's just really, I think he's still on the upswing because he is playing so hard. And I think there's like, it's the classic, like, oh, it's just keep rewarding this type of thing. So I think it's his backfield now after what I thought would be a 50-50 split. I think it's turning truly into more just Harris only. Okay, with 2 series with Harris, series with Warren, or 3 series with Harris, 1 series with Warren, that kind of split. And depending on how long the series goes, how many touches they get.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick about Steelers off the bye. We talked about, like you said, Mike Williams yesterday. We didn't talk about it really too much on this show because it happened after, and we were not going to retape an intro of a show for Mike Williams. Sorry, Mike. Appreciate you, but but I'm at least curious to see if Mike Williams, who's just always been an X, if he allows them to move George Pickens around a little bit, because right now Pickens has taken 76.3% of his snaps out wide. Van Jefferson's like 67.2%. I think of the 2 guys that you would want to move around a little bit more, it would be Pickens. So I think that's like one wrinkle at least to look out for. My biggest surprise of the season, I think it has to be Washington's offense, which is number 1 in EPA per play.
Everything.
I mean, yeah, they're number one in like a boatload of stuff. They're just absolutely ridiculous. You know, from a rushing perspective, they're great. From a drop back perspective, they're great. I mentioned a lot of stats yesterday on the podcast with Sal about how they're like 11 for 11 on fourth down this year. They have the fewest turnovers through this portion of the season since that stat has been tracked. I mean, it's absurd stuff how just great this offense has been. So, Nate, I do want to break down why this offense is this good. However, I want to, you know, and maybe you can do this with me, but maybe we can digitally join hands here, but I want to look into the camera and just say, Cliff, sorry, buddy.
I'm sorry.
I apologize for, you know, really maybe not outright Cliff Kingsbury slander, but at the very least, like a eye roll towards the whole Cliff Kingsbury thing. Like, yeah, skeptic seems generous of what I at least somewhere what I
between
was.
Slander and skeptic,
somewhere between the two S words. Yeah, slander and skeptic is where I existed with the Cliff Kingsbury thing. I don't think I've ever been an outright Cliff hater because I always pointed out, as much as I didn't really like the pass game, the run game was always good and well thought out in Arizona, and I thought that was going to be the case with these two running backs, Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. But I was very skeptical of him being the guy to like get Jaden Daniels. Maybe he could, you know, give him a nice little floor, but like be the guy to access the ceiling at some point in his career. Well, forget about at some point in his career. Ceiling has arrived now, and I'm not even saying this is the best he's ever going to be. He can develop further, but this offense has just been really downright enjoyable to watch on film too, and especially because I do think the first couple weeks of the season, I don't know if you agree with this, but the first couple weeks of the season, it felt like, yeah, this is the Cliff stuff, man.
Yep.
Terry's on one side of the field. We're doing bubbles on the other side of the field, and we're back to the horizontal rate. And then it was about that week 3 game against the Bengals on Monday night where Terry McLaurin says, yeah, no, I went up to Cliff and said, like, I'd like to move around the formation, like line me up on the right side because I'm seeing this, that, and the other. He scores a touchdown on the go route, and it felt like they started to move away from those things and move towards more what makes Jaden Daniels, which is attack outside the numbers. Again, I read this stat off yesterday that Terry McLaurin has a 17.8 average depth of target against single high. Like, tell me who had a 17 point anything on the Arizona Cardinals offense back in the day? Nobody. So I think they've really leaned into what their two best players, which in my opinion is Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. They've leaned into what those guys do in the pass game. Their run game is still really well organized, and I think also it's varied, it's dangerous, it's efficient. All the things you want in a modern run game. So just can't say enough good about what Washington has done. I of course want to hear what you think about this team so far, and also we definitely have to discuss, like, what does this look like over the second half of the season?
Yeah, I think they can keep it going because I look at their schedule and everything, and also the NFC. I'm like, all right, who's going to challenge this offense that gives you, if you're not on your stuff, they're going to give you issues. And I mean, shoot, we've seen several offenses pick at them, but like the Ravens defense, they got misaligned several times, and those create, when you have speed and you have guys that are where they're supposed to be, like meaning the receivers for Washington. Brian Robinson's hitting 20 miles an hour. Austin Eckler looks healthy and good, and Jaden Daniels, of course, can fly. Is that you make that one mistake, boom, it turns into 20 yards. You make that you're misaligned here, it turns into 15 yards, turns into a touchdown. You bite on a double move, okay, it turns into 10 yards. The lack of negative plays has been astounding to me, and that is really, you already mentioned the turnover stuff. That's a credit to Jaden Daniels. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way much. Yeah, off the top of my head. He had the pick against the Giants in week 2, I think it was, or was the Browns. But he had 2 turnovers, I think, in the red zone. Other than that, though, like, it's just safe plays. But then once in a while, when he has to push it, he'll push it. He had a great throw against the Giants where he's throwing a guy over or a guy open. Even Jaden Daniels, who had reservations about it, it's kind of like and I'm writing about this over, I think, by next week. Nice. But it's just really those negative plays. But the formula wasn't adding up for me with Jaden was that he can scramble, which obviously he can scramble. He's fantastic. He doesn't take any hits now, which is also another thing. Yeah, but it was, all right, you can be efficient. Can you be explosive if you don't have all the go balls every time, all those slot fades, and you take a lot of sacks? Like that's why the math for me was kind of like, ooh, I don't know, this could be wrong. If it's in the wrong system, this could be bad because he's taking 5-6 yard gains while he's taking a 10-yard sack. Well, he's not getting sacked. And that's part of his speed. That's part of his awareness. That's also part of the offensive line for the Commanders, who are playing outstanding. And they overall are one of the biggest surprises of this entire year. So credit to them and Bobby Johnson, their offensive line coach. But they, when I look at them, I think they can maintain this because Daniels looks like a guy that started a lot of games in college. Like, he is calm. Sometimes he'll miss a throw in the sense of his read might be, okay, you could have taken this. That's rookie stuff. But he's not making any damaging mistakes. He's not taking sacks. He's not taking big hits. He's not, when he does push the ball, it's the right time to do it. You mentioned the run game stuff. The most astounding thing to me with this offense is how much they're able to get to from no huddle. And I have talked about this before, and it keeps defenses simple. So they keep you simple. And then because really, like, my game plan, if I were going against them, was like, on third down, okay, you can't let Daniel scramble. You got to make him read it out, play more zone. But what if they get tempo into third down? Okay, I can't get to that exotic call that I have game planned on this. And, oh, shoot, we're running coverage. Oh, there goes Jaden. Or Jaden's got a little 5-yard dink and dunk, and then boom, that's a first down. So it's a lot of guys that just aren't screwing up. Like, Terry McLaurin's a smart player. Zach Ertz is a smart player. Noah Brown, smart player. Luke McCaffrey, smart player. Diami Brown, when he's out there, gets football. He's a tough football player. So you got Zacchaeus, smart player. Brian Robinson, smart player. Austin Eckler, smart player. Jane Daniels, smart player. So that's the thing. I think we're just seeing this combination of intelligence, enough juice, enough speed with the players, and just the tempo of the attack that maybe the pass game stuff isn't that exotic. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's kind of a high school design. But guess what? It works because they are getting high school coverages. So it's a perfect level attack. I've been very impressed. If you guys can't tell, it's just I've been a skeptic of Cliff ever since the second half of 2021 when I saw him never adjust, kept investing in small guys, no motion, which I'm never saying like, oh, motion's everything, but just like how isolated everybody was, a lot of quick game. Just a lot of stuff I left me wanting more, and seeing him evolve personnel, seeing him evolve with his formations. The run game stuff we were bullish on, but it's been amplified even more because the line's playing really well, and just everything is sound. Even if it looks, I wouldn't say gimmicky, but it looks unusual at times. Like some of the formations look unusual. It's old football stuff. It's just that they took some 1984 formation and then just redressed it for 2024. So I've been wildly impressed by both their play. Like, nothing's gimmicky. I mean, they don't run gadget plays. It's not like, it's like screens are the gadgets. But the thing was, the screens are working. It's not screens that are going for 2 yards. They're going for 8 yards because they got the gritty guys. They're understanding the space. The line knows where to go. So it's way better coached than I ever expected. Daniels, I knew his intelligence. I knew his accuracy. But man, those lack of mistakes, those lack of sacks, the lack of putting the ball in the harm's way, that's been as impressive as any of his Hail Marys or any of his scrambles. I mean, shoot, the scrambles are... he does not get hit. He's like freaking Wayne Gretzky. It's like he just can shimmy on in between guys and go out of bounds. And he outran Brian Burns. Like, and Brian Burns had a step on him, and he outran him and didn't even get hit. And it's just like, that's, to me, sustainable because he's showing it. It's not where I'm like, oh, he's getting hit 15 times. Just wait till he gets hurt. Yeah, he hurt the rib, but that was kind of a freak thing. So I'm really, really impressed by this offense. Are they to the level of best offense we've seen in 20 years or number one offense? No, I still think there's some holes. I still think some better, like really good defense will give them some issues as they game plan them, but they're going to make it so tough on everybody. And if you're not up to your boom, there they are for another big explosive play, another efficient play. Oh, okay. Now we clamp down on it. Okay, here's a double move to Terry McLaurin, touchdown, boom, they just scored. All right. Like, that is so frustrating. So props to Cliff, props to the Commanders offense, props to Jaden Daniels and all this. It's been one from like I scoffed at to one I actually enjoy watching week in, week out. Yeah.
A couple things here. One, I think they perfectly embody modern football to me right now, which is you do need like the screens and the creative things like that, but you also need, and I don't think, I'm trying to say this nicely, I just don't know that they had those guys in Arizona, like the guys I'm describing. You need like really smart, as you said, really gritty and unselfish players to do this type of stuff. Like, look at the Lions, right? They're such a well-organized offense, and they have a bunch of dudes who nobody's out there kind of complaining about, what about me? Nope. It's a lot of guys that are unselfish and sacrifice for the team because they're bought into the culture and they're bought into sort of the toughness aspect that that Dan Campbell is preaching. I don't really know as much. Obviously, it's not as loud with like Cliff and Dan Quinn's definitely a culture type guy, but still, they brought in a lot of dudes in the offseason that were smart and unselfish and gritty guys. Like Eckler's a player like that for sure. Zach Ertz is a player like
Biotish at center.
Biotish. Yeah. Terry McLaurin is like he obviously was there, but my thing with Terry McLaurin is like sometimes I need you to complain a little bit more for that football. Like I need you to do a little bit more of the receiver stuff. But that's the type of guys they have, so they're able to execute some of these things that maybe in Arizona, all these like gadgety screens and stuff like that. Yeah, like you said, they go for 2-3 yards, and it's like, what are we doing here? As opposed to these big plays, because you don't have guys doing the dirty work there. The second thing, 2 notes on Jaden Daniels to just back up some of the things you were saying there. Number 1, leads the NFL in dropbacks with no huddle. By a lot, 180. Number 2 is Geno Smith with 122. He has 1,238 passing yards on no huddle, 8.54 yards per attempt, and 7.44 adjusted net yards per attempt. So
it's not dink and dunk simple stuff. It's like it's real dropback and play action stuff they get to. Yeah, it's just.
And in terms of throwing the ball deep, he's not like, deep throw percentage among guys that have taken 50% of his dropbacks. He's like he's in the middle there. He's in the middle-ish. Nothing crazy, but in terms of like the actual efficiency of those plays, he's 4th in the NFL, again, with 50% of their dropbacks. He's 4th in the NFL in passer rating on those plays. So they're not overdoing it. They're not just like chucking it, but they're smart and intentional when they take those shots. So I do think there's staying power here. I guess the one curiosity going forward is just, are there any other players coming along for the ride here other than the guys that we've already talked about? Like the running backs, yes. I think Eckler's already shown that if Brian Robinson misses time, you immediately just drop him into your lineup, even if he's never going to be a feature back ever again. I think that's probably right. But like otherwise, Terry McLaurin, are we going to see Noah Brown's had some games, but are we going to see Luke McCaffrey get more snaps? That's really the only thing from a fantasy perspective, because otherwise, you keep starting these players and you kind of keep it moving. Let's get a little negative here. Let's talk disappointments.
Oh, I'd love to. I've been pumping, I've been chomping at the bit, or champing at the bit to do this. This is just one that we've talked about a few times, how they talk about their quarterback. Also want to say too, the one another astounding thing with the Commanders offense, how incredible they are on 3rd and long. They lead the NFL in 3rd and long conversion percentage above the Chiefs, which is saying something.
That's saying something.
And then they're really good on 4th down. So like when they don't get the 3rd and long, they get to a lot of 4th and manageables and they convert them. So that's a good formula if you can stick with it. But anyways, biggest disappointment was my preseason potential biggest surprise is everything about the Colts.
Yeah.
Everything. The defense.
Transparency here. This was going to be my biggest disappointment. I saw Nate got into the outline and got it first. Like, good, great. Yeah. I can't wait to hear what you have to say, because you were definitely, when we did the top 10 offenses show, you were I was high on the Colts, totally in, but you were even higher than I was. So man, the higher you have them, the harder it is to see them fall.
Yeah, this is and this was I'm getting away from it. I'm not letting this 2023 Falconsing it. But it's just with this Colts offense. Starting with the defense first off, no one cares about it in fantasy, but first off, that just everything about that, their plan of attack for the season, going with Gus Bradley, it was like, this is what we should have expected. But the offense, I was so optimistic about. Shane Steichen, who I still think is a good play caller. There is nothing wrong with the designs that I've been watching it, but just the management, the handling of Anthony Richardson, which shouldn't surprise anyone, that's been disappointing. Thinking a lot of it's more owner driven than as I'm kind of been piecing a lot more together and hearing some things. So that's another interesting variable to throw into this. Why isn't he like Andrew Luck? Why isn't he like Peyton Manning? Fireworks factory. Why aren't you there yet? That's what it kind of seems like with Jim Irsay, but we'll get to that in a later time. The receivers, kind of how they've been playing. I know Pittman's been hurt, but just his kind of like, it feels like he's hurt when I watch him. Alec Pierce has been fine in his role. Okay, I'll give him a shout out. Downs being out there, but some of his injury stuff as well. A.D. Mitchell has been so up and down, which was to be expected. But still, it's just kind of like I was hoping more of a better ramp up. It feels like they threw him into the deep end and went, "Oh, you can't swim?" As opposed to as opposed to start him in the shallow end and then get him in the deep end. They kind of reversed all these things. And the run game has still been solid. And Jonathan Taylor, when he's out there, is still Jonathan Taylor. But just even the offensive line at times has had some botches that have been very disappointing to me because they've always been, I'm not going to say overrated. They outplay their talent because of the scheme and also because they're just competent across the line, as far as just like how their star power is. But even some of that is kind of like leaves you wanting more, especially in pass protection. And then I would just say the whole thing with Richardson's really the driver of this thought and what they expected out of him. And they trot out Joe Flacco. And it's kind of like, what'd you guys expect? And if this is on the coaches and everything, it's like really bad. If this is an ownership decision, it's just like still then it's like, okay, well, this is extremely disappointing that they're in the playoff hunt and then that they're just going through all these things rather than just dealing with some of the woes of starting such a young and experienced quarterback. So it's just the whole mixed messages of the Colts. Even if I still like some of the structural things, there are enough cracks with their operation outside of football or outside of the games, I should say, that now I'm just like, man, you guys are supposed to be such a good vibes team. Like this should not be a bad vibes team at all. Like this should just be like, oh, we missed the playoffs. Ah, shucks. Like that's how I thought about them this year. And I thought I would get them winning 9 games was going to be outstanding, or 10, but like the fact that they might go 7 and 10 and just be like, holy, we got to reset this. It's like, what did you guys think you were? So that just everything, just their own self-reflection, I guess, is kind of just been very, very disappointing for me because I was so optimistic going into this year.
Yeah, it's really tough, man. And there's just so many players here to like. There's so many players that could be doing something and they're just not. And I think Pittman, I've been a big Pittman fan, but he just hasn't had a good year, I think, because of this injury. And like, let's put him on IR and like not have him out there. But I think they were so spooked by what A.D. Mitchell gave them in the first, which I know that they were really, really high on him. Like in training camp and stuff like that. And they liked him. And then they saw him in practice. And then I think they got really over their skis about where he was. And then they saw him on the field and they're like, oh shoot, Ashton Doolin is playing like more snaps than him now at this point, which is a whole nother thing. So I think that obviously maybe like, oh no, we can't have Pittman's our steady guy. But then the way they're using Pittman now is they're kind of like having him run more deeper routes because Richardson's out there, which doesn't really fit. Like, I don't know. It just, I agree with you. I still think Shane Steichen's a really good play caller, or all of that. All of that is true. But I do just think there's been so much, and I don't know how much of this is him, and like you said, ownership and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Just so much mismanaging of what's going on here, even to the point that like now we've got Joe Flacco in here. All right, well, we're going more 12 personnel than ever. Like in the Shane Steichen era, we're going more under center than ever. Well, that causes us to pull Josh Downs on the field because he doesn't off the field because he doesn't fit the stereotypical like size that you want or whatever. Well, guess what? Your run game stinks with Flacco. So I actually, like, again, the point of what's going to happen the rest of the season, I don't know, man. Like this is one I could see getting more troubling, going forward than like we're going to get a lot of clarity. Cause like, I do think
schedule,
it's not great.
No, it's insane. They go Bills, Jets, Lions, okay, Patriots, but like it's not like the Patriots are like a total cakewalk. I know they suck, but they're not like, they still have to deal with May and like still a beefy defense. Then they go bye week. Then they got the Broncos defense. Then they got the Titans defense. And then they go Giants.
Forget it. You all you had to say was the next 3 games, like Bills, Jets, Lions. Tell me how this offense looks better. Tell me how what we've seen, like forget the fantasy stuff and all that, like just the product that the offense has actually put out on the field when Joe Flacco has been the quarterback. Tell me how they're going to get through those next 3 games. And every single person who is invested in the Indianapolis Colts in some way, fan, personnel, like whatever, they're not like, what are we doing? Put Richardson back out there. Like, I think I would almost say there is a 0% chance come week 13 when they play the Patriots that Flacco is still starting for them. And like, I don't really know what that, obviously this is a fantasy show. I don't really know what that means from a fantasy perspective at this point, but I don't even know what it means from a real life perspective either.
I mean, you just brought it up too with that they go more under center, like having a QB read element. Shoot, just watching Jaden Daniels go against the Giants. I just mentioned that Brian Burns example. I tweeted this. And then Brian Burns is so scared to get burned by Jaden Daniels again. He plays extremely sound. Like he's just like, on the zone read stuff. And then it wasn't even Eckler. It wasn't even a Robinson in there. It was Rodriguez.
Chris Rodriguez.
Oh my God, that name was Kentucky legend, I believe. Yeah, that was a late draft favorite for some people. But Rodriguez, he just can get north because Burns has to play so sound because he's scared of Daniels. So even with Anthony Richardson, so take away not even caring about his throwing ability, when his value as the legs was part of his appeal, in that he's one of the most dangerous runners in the entire NFL. You take just the threat of that out, it changes how defenses play the run. It changes how defenses play on passing downs. So like you say, I mean, I know you're just talking about the next 4 weeks, but say after the bye that, like, God, how many times did we say about this Colts team? They need an early bye. They need an early bye. We were so right on that. It was like, this team needed a week 9 bye. They needed it so badly. Say they play the Broncos, who are in a bunch of man coverage, a bunch of blitzing stuff. You know how you get them out of it? Have the quarterback run 10 times, and they'll just go, screw that. We're playing cover 4, cover 2. Play against the Bills this week. They run a lot of cover 2. You know how you beat that? Run the ball. But if you're under center, you lose some juice because of just the RPO element that can make cover 2 just a little wonky, especially stuff in the middle. So all the stuff that you're saying Flacco brings to the table, which is all bullshit anyways, that the other argument is, even if Richardson's out there throwing 38%, just his run element will make the rest of the offense so much more better. It's just that, I know. It's just that's why they're my biggest disappointment. I mean, if you guys can't tell, it's just like every answer they try to come up with, you could just poke at 10 different things and go, but what about this? What about this? And it didn't have to be this way. It should be such a good vibes team. And that's what makes them more mad. Makes me more mad, I should say.
I feel you. I'm gonna actually stick in the AFC South with my disappointment here, and I'm not gonna go too long on this because actually they fit into my trend segment as well. So just the Texans passing game has been a disappointment. Yeah. It's obviously there's injuries, I get that, but it's just the way the offensive line is played, which that should have been a unit that they could rely on. They've poured resources into it. They have veteran players like, Laramie Tunsil's been a problem, and he's been like Pro Football Focus, like grading wise, one of their better players, and he's been a huge problem. So, it's been a mess. So they have not gotten consistent play there. I said a lot in the offseason that I thought Bobby Slowick had gotten a little bit overrated over the course of the offseason because CJ Stroud is good. The offense is just like not only have they not taken a step this year, I actually think they've regressed concept wise. So despite and they've, of course, again, injuries are a big part of this, and I could be disappointed by injuries. I could be disappointed by the fact that we've never gotten all 3 of these receivers healthy and at 100% on the field at the same time, and we never will now that Diggs is on IR, and we'll see when Nico's back. Right as Tank Dell's kind of ramping up, then Diggs is out. So it's a bummer, and I don't like, this is another one. Rest of the season, is Nico healthy? I think that will help, but I'm a little concerned just about the ecosystem overall.
And this is my argument for positional value, but this is the whole thing: is that it is the receiver's impact. There's so many steps that have to get there before the receivers can make an impact.
True,
and that's why the Texans, some concerns. I mean, go back to our preseason episodes. Me, you, and Charles, I feel really good about our Texans eval in a lot of aspects because we just said
you guys, maybe not me. Okay. I'm going to excuse myself and actually take it because I think I overlooked a lot. Like by the time we got to ranking the top 10 offenses, I was like, but how's it not going to be great skill position? So
right. Yeah. And for me, it was did I think the offensive line was as good as maybe some people made it out to be? No, but I also thought last year they dealt with so many injuries. It's like it can't get worse. And it's been worse. It's like somehow, some way, Kenyon Green tricked me week 1. I was like, wow. And I said on one of our shows, I was like, he looks like one of the most improved players in the entire NFL. And now he's back to what he's been this entire year. That scorpion frog again, that works out for Kenyon Green as well. But it's just it's just that it all starts with the offensive line. And when you, like we always talk about contract value and everything. Where losing teams happen is when you pay a guy $28 million or $30 million and they play like a rookie, like Laramie Tunsil is. That is a losing value on your team because that money could have gone elsewhere. That money could be used. Those reps that you are losing every single snap, if you're losing more reps than you're winning, those add up. And if that's a player that's supposed to be winning 90% of his reps, okay, again, the math doesn't math. Like that, it's like, okay, so someone else has to pick it up. Well, Kenyon Green sucks. Okay. Now we're relying on Juice Scruggs to be our best offensive lineman. And I like Juice Scruggs more than most people. They're center. But the thing is he's supposed to be our best lineman on a line with Shaq Mason on it as well, who's taking a drop off. Tice Howard, we've kind of already known. So the thing was, for me, was if the offensive line didn't improve, or at least they just stayed okay, then we can get to the receivers, get to the weapons. Stroud's not a total creator in the sense of a runner, but we did see it last week, which is like, okay, maybe hit that rushing over on that shell. Yeah. But that's just because he has to. And it's like, but that's not like, yeah, it's good that he can get to it, but that's not how this team was structured to win. It was structured to win with a nice pocket for 3.4 seconds. Stroud just dices you up and chucks the ball and pushes it. All right, if we can't do that, all right, let's rely on the run game. We have one of the worst run games in the entire NFL, especially when Joe Mixon's not in there. Okay, all right, so we're not based on a quick game offense because also our receivers now we're on backups. John Mechie isn't going to make anyone miss. Xavier Hutchinson is limited in his role. It's just like, what's your answer? Like it's just their answers are all just been taken away. So even if I thought Bobby Slowick, especially off the opening script, kind of drops off, I've never thought of him as just like, I'm not putting him in the category of like, oh, he is terrible, he's the worst.
Yeah, totally.
It's just that he's not a guy that seems to have a way to mitigate those problems because of the offense that he's been in. And just kind of his systems and stuff. So it's just like, I'm grasping for answers too, because their firework factory for a couple of weeks was so fun. And it's so fun to watch it all chuck it. And maybe, like you said, Nico Collins helps that and helps the kind of trickle down effect. But it just starts always with the offensive line. And it's like, what's maybe Green being out now maybe changes it, that they just by, addition by subtraction, maybe. But it's not just him. He wasn't the only issue. The franchise left tackle is playing like a poor player. That's an issue. When a star plays below average, that is a huge gap of performance that you're not expecting. So it's just, yeah, I don't know if I made a point there, but it's just one of those teams where I'm trying to find answers for him. And I'm like, man, you guys are going to win the division too.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah.
We're like going away with it, but they still have so many questions. And I mean, it's a team that's built around Stroud's brain and his ability to operate from tight pockets in the pass rush. That's going to keep them in a lot of games, especially in their division, but it just takes them out of that kind of contention talk, which is disappointing because of how excited I think a lot of us were about them.
That was depressing.
I know. I'm sorry. You let me rant. I told you when you let me go negative, I actually talk even more, which is astounding. So I am very sorry about that.
Well, no, that's good. It gives us a good time to reset, take a break, and then you have at least a positive, and I got like a pseudo kind of positive trend on the other side of the break. So let's take a quick break. We come back. We'll talk through the things we're nerding out about right after this. All right, we're back. Second segment here. We're going to talk through one midseason trend that we are nerding out about here. Nate, true to form, you want to talk a little bit of run game stuff here?
Yeah. This is why I get this show, right? This is why I get these appearances. This is just more me dancing on graves. All the signings, the hand wringing about old running backs and Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. Did you look at the Raiders rushing numbers last year? Did you look at Saquon Barkley with the Giants? Did you see what's happening there? Top three players in rushing yards are Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs. That is
boom,
pretty funny. There's no success rate stat I'm sharing here. That is just sheer rushing yards. And you can look at it anywhere. There they are. Top three on the board. Won't mention that Jordan Mason's 4 and Chuba Hubbard's 5, but those guys are top 3. Brush that aside. But if you look, if you work down the list, James Conner, free agent signing, Alvin Kamara, legend with the Saints. But then we got Jahmyr Gibbs, first round pick, Bijan Robinson, first round pick, Tony Pollard, free agent signing, J.K. Dobbins, free agent signing, Joe Mixon, free agent signing, Kyron Williams, kind of changes this, Najee Harris, investment, Aaron Jones, free agent signing. One guy after another, just looking at sheer rushing yards. It's free agent signings. And this is more just showing running backs aren't dead at 26. Yeah. They can have a second life. I think I don't know. I don't want to get into deep studies here, but I do think that maybe some more limitations where guys aren't taking 300 carry seasons has changed the math of how, the actual area, years of impact of a running back. I think now that their length is extended and they could be more valuable for 2 or 3 years. But really, it's just the running games throughout the NFL are very fun right now. They're very creative. You're seeing teams know that they have to commit to them. So they're investing in ideas. They're investing in talent. I think it's just been really, really cool. And so I just want to nerd out about that you feel Derrick Henry's impact. You feel Saquon Barkley's impact. Saquon Barkley saved the Eagles season because of just all the stuff happening with the pass game until A.J. Brown got healthy, who might be hurt again, until they figured out those. They can always rely on Saquon Barkley and not even just to do the cool backwards hurdles over guys. Josh Jacobs in the Packers run game, they're going to always commit to the run. LaFleur always is. Why not make those touches when it's not blocked well turn into good gains? Like Jacobs is like such a good runner. It's just one of those guys that like I always appreciate when I watch him, then I forget about him. And then I watch the Packers again. I'm like, God, you're good. And then I don't think about Josh Jacobs for another couple of weeks. Maybe it's because I have no dynasty or fantasy shares of Josh Jacobs, and maybe that's why. But I just want to say that having these, and there's a discussion about linebackers with this too, but with running backs is that finding these guys in the right fit, finding them in these good offenses, they can take good offenses to another level. Because now those touches that you give, those 20 touches a game, if 1/3 of your plays are going to one player, he better be freaking good. That's again, talking about math. It's just that if you invest in these guys that have talent that can contribute on 3 downs, Derrick Henry's his own thing because he's actually not good in pass protection. It's one of the most backwards things about him is that these guys are impacting so many touches of the game, impacting them in such a positive way. Those add up. So if you're going, yes, don't get me wrong, you can find a running back on day 3. You can find him in undrafted rounds after the draft. You can find him in any round. I totally get that. The bar is high for running backs because there are so many solid ones, but there are needle movers at the position matter more than ever because of just the tendencies that happen. If they're on the field, I don't know if it's a pass. I don't know if they're going to do a certain thing. Guys that can stay on the field for 3-4 downs, more valuable than ever. They always have been, but even more than ever because it's an answer to what defenses are doing. So this is just me just want to like nerd out about like these dudes matter. And It's really cool to see teams going like, no, I know they matter, so I want to use them. So, and offenses, I might add, that are good offenses. These aren't junky Sharif Abdul-Rahim touches. Again, sorry, basketball reference, but it's not these wasted empty calorie stats. These guys are on winning offenses on good teams, and they are a big driver of that. So yeah, running backs, get them where you can. It's a good running back class next year too in 2025. So right. I don't think this is going away.
Yeah, I mean, these are all top 12 offenses or top 11 offenses by EPA per play that we're talking about here. And in the offseason, when we talked about the Henry and the Saquon Barkley additions especially, because I think the common retort was, look at the production they got out of Gus Edwards. Look at the production they got out of DeAndre Swift. It's like, why don't you just, save those resources for elsewhere? I always came back to the Christian McCaffrey example with the San Francisco 49ers. And McCaffrey's like his own deal. I get that because of what he does.
Shanahan with him. It's kind of a special thing, but yeah.
Well, sort of. I mean, I think mostly just he's different from other running backs because of what he can give you as a pass catcher. Like even Barkley, like you can throw him the ball and he can do stuff, but he's not McCaffrey's a pass catcher. No. Yeah, no. So he does give you more flexibility than some of these other teams. However, what happened in San Francisco was they took a run game that was always going to be good no matter who they threw out there, and then they truly weaponized it with a back in Christian McCaffrey. And that is exactly what's happened in Baltimore, and that's exactly what's happened in Philadelphia. With Green Bay, a little bit different because I feel like they got I don't know. I think a lot of it was just injury stuff with Aaron Jones and all that. Yeah. But also I think that he allowed them a little bit to do more like gap scheme runs with Josh Jacobs because he was so good on like gap concepts with that one season with the Raiders in 22 when he led the NFL in rushing. I think they wanted to vary their run game a little bit more than what they did with Aaron Jones. That's a part of it, but still, yeah, it's just looking beyond, because I think that what we did from a fantasy draft perspective was we took, all right, these guys were, these ecosystems were already good. Like, how much better can they be? I think all of these guys ended up being underdrafted. In addition to the fact that I think that as a fantasy world, I think we have gotten very wide receiver heavy and wide receiver obsessed. And as obviously the lead spokesperson for big receiver, I'm not going to apologize for that. But at the same time, like we do these running backs when they are in the right situations, when they're still talented players, and they haven't fallen off, and none of these guys have. They can actually be the traditional league winners as they were, in like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, stuff like that.
And just not, not to do the whole supply and demand thing, but that's really it is receivers have gotten so talented. And I think just the baseline for receivers is higher, 7-on-7 stuff. That was always the thing. It's like, oh, if quarterbacks do 7-on-7, they got to throw it to somebody. So those guys are probably getting better too. And guess who's gotten better as well? The corners covering them have gotten better than ever because they get so many reps at it. But being the supply and demand thing, it's that, all right, well, man, there's not a lot of 3-down running backs. Well, I got one and he's good. Like that, if there's not a lot of them and you have one, that's a good thing. Like Fred Warner's extremely valuable at linebacker because there's not a lot of guys that can do what he does. I could find you a safety. I can find you a slot corner, maybe not to Brian Branch's level. I know he's playing back, but or Kyle Hamilton or something like that. But I can find you one in the middle rounds. But like getting those guys at those positions that are true needle movers, not just a cog in a machine, but the actual engine. That's the difference of all of it too. Or if you're the Ravens, 2 engines with Lamar and Derrick Henry back there. But yeah, just making like you said, weaponizing it. That's a great way to put it because that's what they did. They added more teeth to an attack that was already efficient.
All right. You mentioned receivers. That transitions us into my trend that I'm nerding out about. And this is sort of negative, but also sort of positive. To me, what I think I'm realizing watching offenses, especially this year and really into last year a little bit too, if you can't block it up, and or your pass concepts stink. There's a couple teams that fit into both. Yeah. If you can't block it up and or your pass concepts stink, it truly does not matter how much talent you have in the passing game. It also helps to have a veteran quarterback too. We've talked about some of these teams like Detroit. And you feel the like veteranness of the offense when it's all kind of coming together. Houston is definitely one of those teams that we just talked about. They can't block it up, and I think their pass concepts are okay. They're very standard Shanahan stuff. Last year I thought they really did a great job, and I think again injuries have forced their hand a little bit here. Last year I think they did a really good job of working Tank Dell on outbreakers and Nico on inbreakers, but they can't really do Tank Dell on the deep outbreaker stuff because he's just not 100% healthy. So kind of put them to the side a little bit here. But to me, you so deeply feel the gap between the teams that I'm talking about here that don't do this and Baltimore, Buffalo, Detroit, Tampa Bay, my favorite little pet offense right now to watch because Tampa Bay is a great example because they don't have right now. They do not have good wide receiver talent, period. End of story. However, look at the ways that Liam Cohen has designed routes to free up our guy Sterling Shepard on these little quick outbreakers that Baker loves to throw, and he's their most reliable receiver right now. But you still got to clear that space out for a guy like Sterling Shepard because you don't have Mike Evans to do that, and also just using Cade Otton now as that kind of Godwin adjacent replacement player. And again,
Otwin.
Yeah. Ought to win.
I thought there was a better pun there and it came out of my mouth and it just didn't hit. Sorry.
No, I think you got us in the neighborhood. But again, like all of those, like, look at what Detroit does. Like I said, Buffalo obviously I think does this really well because they can block it up pretty well. And then I think they're really working Shakir and Coleman well off of each other now at this point. Because then I look at teams that like don't do this well. And the takeaway here is that we got to try to find these teams and avoid them in the offseason. Yeah. It's tough to do because I know fans and listeners like hate this analysis, but like, I'm sorry, but once you see it, you know it. Once you see it, you know it, that this is like, oh, this is a red alert team. But you don't necessarily, even no matter what the coordinators run before and all that stuff, you're just not 100% sure until you see it. And the team this year, the easiest example is obviously Chicago. It's obviously Chicago. All that wide receiver talent that they have, and it truly doesn't matter because their route combinations stink and they can't block.
It's just everything.
It's real. So like. They're the obvious team that I'm talking about here in terms of like feel the gap. And look, on paper, Chicago has better wide receiver talent than all of those teams I just listed off. I would say more than Baltimore. Yeah. More than Buffalo for sure. Yeah. Amari Cooper, maybe, I don't know, but still like I would.
Yeah, but just do the face smash thing. All right, would you rather have Roman Dunze or Khalil Shakir? Oh yeah, Roman Dunze. I would love Khalil Shakir. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Would you rather have DJ Moore, Keon Coleman?
I'd rather have DJ Moore. Even like Keenan Allen versus like
I know, right? That's why I didn't mention them.
Yeah. But like even Detroit, I would argue that, yeah, St. Brown, if we put all these guys together, is probably better. But would I rather have? I'd rather have almost every Chicago receiver, maybe besides Keenan Allen, than of Jameson Williams. As much as I like what Williams brings to the offense, Tampa Bay, definitely different conversation when they have their guys. But watch the sickos out there. Go watch the Bears offense on film last week, and then go watch the Bucs. And one of them is going to feel a lot better. Okay, and so again. That we're talking about a team that has Roman Dunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and then a team that has Trey Palmer and Ryan Miller and Sterling Shepard. So to me, like it's hard to know in the offseason, and I know, like I said, listeners hate that stuff because it's like, tell me what's going to happen. Well, when you see it, you know it, and I think from very early in the season, alarm bells started to go off in terms of like a team like Chicago. Are there any others you can think of that like right off the top of the head? I mean,
the Jags.
Jags.
I know that's obvious. I mean, I could have told you that too. That was just
I was gonna say, I one definitely the Giants. I just recently watched like the Giants against the Steelers, and I wanted to like throw my laptop out of the window because I don't love anything. I think they just, and some of it's because I don't think Brian Daboll wants to coach Daniel Jones anymore. But like he's got to be so annoyed at the sort of smoke.
But he's kind of letting that off. Blind him a little bit sometimes. Like it's like because their opening drive stuff's always really good, and then you could you can feel the frustration come in, and I think it's just a lot of
it's all really good, but it's also like here's our third screen in the first 5 plays.
That's it. It's really it. It's oh man, I want to appreciate the Giants defense so much, and then there's just so many times where I'm just like they make one mistake, and I'm like, well, that's ball game because I know they can't score. So it's just like that's it. That must be the worst feeling. I haven't been around a lot of awful offenses in my life, so it's like that's just not a couple Jags teams where my dad was there, but they weren't even that awful. They were like average. So it's kind of a not a normal feeling. I'm trying to think who other teams that like. This was my frustration when people were blaming cover 2 for everything. It's like, block it up and you'll be good. I guess the Seahawks, because of how vertical their offense is.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's why they're an and/or. That's why I and/or this because Seattle definitely can't block it up, but I do like some of the
and they try to mitigate it, but it just doesn't work sometimes. Like, that.
But I think they tried to mitigate it by doing all this like quick game stuff with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then it's like, oh, then that stinks. But then when we let him run routes in the intermediate area of the field, look at that, So, but it's kind of tough because they don't then like they can't have DK do quick game stuff because of the way he is. They can't. That's not Lockett. So it's a little bit and/or, but definitely next year I will be thinking more and more about. I'm certainly not gonna yada offensive line concerns, and I'll be thinking about a guy like Shane Waldron's probably like a baseline NFL coordinator, but he's not helping problems. He's not helping problems here, and like so then we got an issue on the offensive line. What are we doing to mitigate that? Nothing. And then from a pass concept standpoint, what does that look like? It's not good. So I think that's.
You look at other teams like the Rams though have O-line injuries, and having Stafford helps. And receiver injuries, and it's just like they're still operating. Like they're still like I watch them against the Bears when all these guys, Tutu Atwell's out there, and the offensive line's willful. They're still moving the ball. Like, and that's another thing. Yes, again, having Stafford helps, but there's a lot of good quarterbacks that can do that with bad ecosystems, and it's just they still find a way because they go, well, this backup's in, so we gotta give him chip help. Well, this guy's in, so we got to slide the protection over there, and just speaking from my background and my dad's background, it's like that takes why there's staffs that don't get to it is they're lazy because it takes a lot of work to do that because every play you can't just go, all right, run this concept, how we put it in day 2 in camp. You have to go, okay, we have to use this formation. We only can call on the right hash because we have to give chip help to this side. So when we're on the left hash, we have to have 3 separate plays. That takes so much work, but this is why Sean McVay, and I know older guys hated everyone, the Wonder Boy stuff like this. This is why he earns the props from me and others, is because he puts in the work. That's what I appreciate about Sean McVay. Is he psycho? Yeah. And that's why, but his attention to detail is insane. That's why I appreciate guys like him or Kyle Shanahan and stuff like that, or what Ben Johnson does, just understanding what their weaknesses are. It's such a matchup league, but we always just think of that as, best receiver against a bad corner. No, matchups can be we can't let our right guard block Quinnen Williams for 50 snaps. Like, we can do it 3 snaps and hope to get away for it. When you watch bad teams, I'm going to bring up Dable again. Left tackle goes out, and I think they address this. Left tackle goes out, Andrew Thomas, who's a star. Backups in there, they don't provide chip help for him. That's a coaching adjustment and awareness. It's like, okay, yeah, you had cool plays that you wanted to get to. Those go out the window because now you have a backup left tackle against this pass rusher. Again, it's attention to detail. And again, that's why guys get props. But yeah, offensive line usually is I need a new phrase, but canary in the coal mine for a lot of the issues going on because it shows kind of a lack of awareness and stuff. I got to come up with a different phrase because I use that one too much. And I like that phrase. But yeah,
it's just like the great equalizer, man, because again, you can have all of these great players in your passing game and all that, and it can go to waste. So, I mean, even Cleveland's a weird example because Deshaun Watson was just tanking the whole thing, but they have talent. They have talent in their pass catching department, and they have issues in protection. And I don't even know if that's like kind of just a player's issue. I don't know if that's totally a Stefanski thing. So they just don't have. I think they did try to transition offensive lines and all this stuff, and so yeah, it's kind of a whole issue. But anyways, final point on this, just before we throw to the break, like you mentioned it, these guys work at this stuff. This takes time. The answer to almost anything in life, like how did this happen? How did this person get this? Why is this person there? And it's definitely true in the NFL. Like, how did Sean McVay become the best offensive coach in the league, or one of them? How did Devontae Adams go from being one of the worst wide receivers we've ever seen to one of the best we've ever seen? Work. Hard work. Takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes work. So that's what the good coaches are doing. Again, impossible to know. Like, again, I'm not here to say, and I hate this type of analysis anyways, like, here's the answers to the test for 2025. You know, like, I don't know. I don't know all these dudes. Nate doesn't know all these dudes about, like, okay, well, you know, this guy's really putting in the work and this guy's not. But something to monitor going forward.
It is.
All right.
It is.
Let's take our last break. We come back. We'll preview a pretty damn good Thursday night game right after this. All right, we're back. Hey, Tice, pretty big Thursday night football game here we've got going on. Bengals at Ravens. We've got a 6.5 point favorite in the Baltimore Ravens. Got a 53 beefy over-under. Two defenses that struggle, honestly, at this point, and two offenses that are very good. So what are we looking at in this game?
Oh, boy. So, yeah, Ravens defense is good against the run, but they are getting gashed in the passing game. You know, also just getting gashed in the passing game, the Bengals defense. And also the Bengals defense struggles against the run.
I was going to say, they're getting gashed in the everything game, but still.
At least the Ravens have a little something to rely on. I'll just start, and shoot, this might be just how the Justin Jefferson thinking was last week. But Derrick Henry's over-unders at 89.5 yards. I'm hitting the over. I don't think that's high enough. I think he's in triple digits in this game.
It's up to 90. It's up to 93.5 right now on BetMGM.
Oh, it is? Okay, my old site here. It's that's good. Okay, yeah, hold on. We gotta get the proper website on here. Yeah, here we go.
Hit that refresh, pal.
Yeah. So no, that's because I had a non-sponsored site as the one that came up. But no. So wherever it's at, I'm taking the over. This is a terrible run defense. Yes. Lou Anarumo, the defense coordinator, will come up with some cool game plan stuff. It's a short week. It's a divisional opponent, so they do have reps against it. This is kind of its own animal a little bit with this Ravens attack this year. I just don't think they have the horses. I think the Ravens are going to commit to it because they always do, and this is where you see one of those second half Henry gets really rolling on there. So that's more. It's not very original, but it's one that I'm looking at completely because I just think the matchup makes sense and the player makes sense. So starting there, but also on the other end, because I actually think the Bengals are going to be very nickel-dimey and hoping to pop one as far as passing the ball. I don't think Chase Brown gets, he'll get his touches, but he's not going to pop any. This Ravens defense has a lot of explosive runs. So actually I was going to look at under Chase Brown's rushing yards.
I have that one too. Yeah.
So starting with the running backs, those are my two bets. Okay. Yep. All right. Yep. The 58.5. Yeah, all right. I'm going under there. Not that I don't think he'll be efficient, but I think it's more of like a 11 carries, 48 yards kind of game where none of them really pop, all go for 4 or 5 yards. That's the design of the Bengals offense. That's how I kind of pictured it going against this Ravens defense.
Yeah. And, they just brought in Khalil Herbert, but they've said like he might play in this game. So
off the plane.
Shoot, they need him.
Off the street is usually the line. That's gonna be off the plane. Jesus.
Yeah, literally. So I mean, he might play in this game. And that could even just still limit potentially Chase Brown opportunities here. So yeah, again, under 58.5 rushing yards, I think for Chase Brown makes sense. It's tough in the passing game for both teams. Again, we're big game hunting. I thought about Jamar Chase overs because just we don't know. T. Higgins probably not going to play in this game. Man, people have bet the over on Deontay Johnson 20.5 receiving yards down to -140. I'm almost tempted to do the under on that one, just because he barely played last week.
I know, and also personnel usage, they're going to be with a lot of 1 or 2 receiver sets, so that's not going to put Johnson even. Well, all right, are you going to beat out Rashad and Zay Flowers right away, or are we going to ease you into 3 receiver sets? So I haven't looked at what the base nickel splits are for the Bengals, but that they haven't defended anything well. So,
I was gonna say, do you really need to?
I know, it's every way I parse it, and I've been trying to find angles for it. Where if they did this really well, and it's no, they're just poor in everything they defend right now. So actually, I was looking at Rashad Bateman over 29.
Yeah, well,
I think it's 29.5 right now.
Yes, 29.5. Yeah, I mean, oh man, where could we go wrong betting on our guy Rashad?
I know,
Bateman? Right? But yeah, I like over 29.5 for him. You just look at the route participation last week. You got to go a while to get to Deontay Johnson. Rashad Bateman leads the team 81.8%. Zay Flowers 72.7%. Mark Andrews 50%. Justice Hill 50%. Nelson Aguilar 49.9%. 40.9%. Excuse me. Derrick Henry 31.8%. Deontay Johnson 27.3%. 7th on the team, tied with Isaiah Likely. So I mean, Derrick Henry's running more routes than you. You're not playing a lot, and this is still a short week. So I know he'll now be with the team about 10-ish days at this point. But yeah, it's only a short week. So I actually think if we do bet the Bateman over, we also should combine it with Deontay under 20.5, which is plus money, plus 105. Like I said, the over on Deontay is 140. And listen, if Deontay Johnson stabs me in the heart, that's fine. Yeah, I like the player, but that does feel a little bit like a sucker bet. -140, 20.5, just because he's a name. They just traded for him. Bengals defense stinks.
I recognize that they traded for him. Bet the over on it.
I like. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, do you have Jamar Chase longest reception on there?
I hate the longest reception bets, but it is 25.5 yards.
Just because the Ravens defense gives up a lot of explosives and they don't tackle well. So that's the only reason I'm looking at that one. If I were
the only thing that freaks me out about the Chase longest number one, I have just a weird block with longest receptions, and I think it's nothing more
as hell.
Yes, well, one, it's you might chase that thing all game long, which it's something to root for, something to watch. But it does frustrate me when you see a guy have a big game, say Chase goes over 90 yards and hits the over on his receiving yards, but it's just a bunch, it's 18, 9 for 90 or something like that. Yeah, that annoys the hell out of me. And a lot of sports betting and wagering and fantasy, it's all just, what can you live with? So I struggle with the longest reception one, especially as somebody who lost a Nico Collins bet doing this earlier in the year. So maybe this is just a little bit of PTSD coming through. But you look at Chase the last 2 weeks, obviously without T. Higgins, in terms of it has been a lot of underneath stuff too. 5.23 yards, air yards per target. They've been trying to pepper him underneath and get yards after catch, and it just hasn't really happened. So, and a lot of it is because when he does go deep, it's been hard doubles because nobody's really scared of Yoshivas and Gesicki and these guys, and Jermaine Burton can't show up on time, so he's not out there. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little conflicted about the Chase stuff.
Yeah. Oh man, what's Gesicki? No, I that's talked me out of it because that's just for me. It's just watching this Ravens defense. I mean, shoot, even Bo Nix had a couple chances at it and missed them. It's no matter what the passing game is, everyone's been getting a chance, and that's another thing too. Is that the running back Austin Eckler had an explosive reception against this defense, or is it a tight end? Is it Gesicki that they target against them? The linebacker, Roquan Smith has taken a step back this year. Just looks slower, especially in coverage. Does that open up Gesicki? So again, that's where I'm kind of with the Bengals side. It's like, I do think they're going to get some action. I just don't know where to sprinkle it. So that's where I'm struggling. I mean, shoot, Gesicki's at 50.5. No way. Like that, it's like if that was lower, I'd be all over it. So maybe that's an under looking at it, but that just to me seems like.
What about catches for Gesicki? 4.5
catches? I would be more apt to look at because that makes a lot more sense. Maybe this style of attack this week. It's just they're gonna get quarters, and that's the thing too. Is like the Ravens are smart. Like, do they put Hamilton in certain spots? And so that's what's so hard. And it's a short week.
I know.
That's why short weeks are so tough too. It's just like a lot of just kind of like inside baseball or inside football is that Thursday game plans are generally carryover from what they did on Sunday. So you kind of keep 60% of that game plan and then maybe sprinkle in a couple plays. If you go against a divisional opponent, you kind of know maybe some of the things you can get to, especially if you're going against Lou Anarumo for the 40th time, or repeating the Ravens system. So does that mean Gesicki gets those touches again? Because that was the plan of attack last week, which was supposed to be Burton, so I know. So that's
their game plan hit a few wrinkles.
Yeah. So are they going to re-wrench it because they got the Burton wrench thrown in there already? Yeah. So that's why it's just hard to kind of pick on that. Even if I do think maybe it's Burrow is the bet, maybe just like, over completions for him or over yards for him. If you do want to sprinkle on that side, what is it? Oh, he's at 24.5. That, again, that like actually feels maybe a sprinkling over on 24.5 completions, even if I hate usually completion bets. That's another bet. That's a bet I hate.
Okay. But I think for one, let's narrow this down here.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I just sprayed and prayed it everywhere.
Yeah, no, you're good. We're definitely doing Henry over 93.5.
Yes.
We're definitely doing Chase Brown under 58.5 rush yards. Yes. We are doing Rashad Bateman over 29.5 receiving yards and Deontay Johnson under 20.5 receiving yards at plus money, baby. Plus money, okay? At least as we're talking about this right now on BetMGM, which is the site we're using. And so when let's take out the Jamar Chase thing. I kind of like your Burrow completion one because a couple of things. They are trying to pepper Chase underneath right now. That's been the case over the last two games without T. Higgins. You mentioned just rolling over the game plan from last week. Regardless of the Burrow stuff, that has been the case. Also, if you look at the Baltimore defense, they get gashed by everything, but they are fourth in terms of yards allowed to slot receivers so far this year. They want to get Chase out of the slot. That Gesicki, and look, the game plan last week, it ended up being Mike Gesicki's taken 61.7 or 61.4% snaps from the slot the last 2 weeks.
Love that.
We've been trying to, this is definitely what they want to do, but it's where they're at right now and it's what they got to do. And again, with all of that playing time, he has gotten a first down on 22.5% of his routes. Like that's beefy for old boy Mike Gesicki here.
Mike G.
Yeah, he's been targeted on he's 14.3%. Oh, that's touchdowns, excuse me. He's been targeted an absurd amount of these routes so far, and they've gotten him out there. So, and I think that's going to be underneath stuff. So I like the Burrow completions, and I'll let you make a decision on Gesicki 4.5 catches, but I actually don't know if I hate it.
I'm shying away from it.
All right, cool.
Shy away.
If we can shy away from Mike Gesicki, that's fine.
I'd rather bet on Burrow than Mike freaking Gesicki. Cool. So the Burrow completions one, I'm like, actually, I like that one a lot. So that's what I'm going to go with there rather than the Gesicki stuff. So I'm staying away from that. That's what's hard. It's just hard to parse, even if I think Burrow will be able to pepper him.
Like I said, it's what you can live with. And
thank you for tying a bow at the end of our rambling, figuring this out on the fly picks section. It's been working. So
it has been working.
You get to hear our brainstorming as we come across the props that you like.
Yeah. So when Jamar Chase definitely has 120 yards receiving with a 30-yard catch,
250 yarders.
Gesicki's got 5 catches, and Burrow somehow only completes 20 passes. We won't feel like idiots. Totally won't feel like idiots. Yeah. Okay. Hey. So Burrow over 24.5 completions, but I like it. Anything else from this game? Not prop wise, just something to look out for.
Oh no, I think it's gonna be a really fun game. I don't think you got two really good offenses going at it against defenses but that's the thing. It's a divisional game. It's a short week, so that's what's always kind of cool. Or can be frustrating if you're trying to predict it. is that it's truly a any given Sunday or any given Thursday type game because of just the circumstances of that. So I'm very much looking forward to it because I think both offenses will have some cool moments. But again, Thursday night divisional round, we're seeing if the Bengals divisional game, we're seeing if the Bengals can kind of keep the good times going, to try and spot everybody a lead and still make the playoffs, I guess is what their formula is, and see if the Ravens have a juggernaut on offense. So if they continue that, or if Lou Anarumo's got some surprises for him. So just, kind of what you heard from that whole rambling, meandering pick section for me is I'm pretty excited about this game because there's so many angles to attack.
So am I. A lot of things to watch here. Should be a pretty good one. Could definitely be hey, how do you do in Thursday Night Football? That's going to determine the rest of your fantasy week. That is for sure. With that, that's all we got. Nate, appreciate you, buddy. As always, electric episode. I feel like we praised teams. We maybe didn't praise some other teams. It was a good time. Tell the people what you got working on right now that they can check out.
Midseason awards. That's what I got coming out. By the time you listen to this, it should be out. But yeah, all the good awards. And then Football 301. Our episode was out. We did things we liked and one thing we didn't, and also did some trade reactions, which I thought was a lot of fun. And maybe that's one-sided or not. I got a new poster behind me, Dazed and Confused. And also the last thing is
seen it.
You have
seen Dazed and Confused? Yes.
That makes sense, actually. Old soul. You're like, oh, this takes place in the 70s. Yeah, we're good. That's
exactly.
But no, and then Football 301 again tomorrow with Charles McDonald. But yeah, check us out there. So thanks for everyone for listening to this. Thank you for letting me get some negativity off. I end up always having more fun sometimes dripping around the muck than sometimes just continuing the praise.
Yeah, I hope you feel better after this. I
do.
I feel a little bit worse after the Colts stuff, but what can you do? That's the NFL, man. Not everything's going to go to your plans. Like I said, that's going to do it for this show. Appreciate everybody for listening. If you like the show, maybe subscribe on YouTube. Maybe leave us a like. Maybe comment. Maybe if you're listening to the podcast, whichever podcast platform you're listening on, maybe give us a rating if you're going to give us 5 stars. If you're not going to give us 5 stars, as Nate always says, just come yell at us on Twitter and tell us that we suck. Totally fine, but do not leave it on the podcast. But if you like us, 5-star review, rating, that's always good stuff. Tomorrow, on Friday, we'll be back. Andy Behrens and Tara Roberts will join me to preview all of Sunday's Week 10 action. How are we in Week 10 already? Until then, we're out.